Welcome to today, our third episode on our incredible series that we have with our special guest again, Natasha from EIM Canada. Thanks to all our audience who have been reading or listening to our podcast and reading the content sometimes. Shared a very good feedback with us. Again, thank you for all the contribution and feedback you're giving to us. So yeah, thank you so much for that. Today, it's a very trailing episode as well that we'll be touching base on. But before we do that, just want to give you a short introduction about what is all this podcast is all about. It's a deep dive into stories and strategies and systems that drive real success, right? Again, I'm your host, 𝗖𝗧 𝗖𝗂𝗶𝘁𝗂𝗏. I'm excited to have you all with us to uncover that human side of business, innovation, and impact. Whether you're growing a seasoned business, starting fresh with a new venture, or simply passionate about personal and professional development, this is the space for you. Today, we're going to kick off with a very interesting topic. Again, I've got my incredible special guest with a deep knowledge and, of course, quite a very deep insight on how we're going to navigate through the couple of points that we've outlined in terms of the topics for our podcast. Throughout this series, we will also explore insights and tools that empower individuals, right, and teams to thrive. Whether you are in the early stage of your journey or looking to refine what you've already built. Natasha has already grabbed his coffee or tea and is ready to hit the road to give you all these beautiful insight. So let's dive in together as we go beyond the blueprint. Natasha, welcome back again to our third episode.
Thank you, 𝗖𝗧. I'm happy to be here.
Great. So today we're going to touch on a very interesting topic, scaling operations from startup to growth phase. And again, I just want to emphasize here, it's not just for only startups. Even for existing business, can really take a chunk of information here that could help them to improve their operational or scaling up their operational businesses, right? Or growth phases. So Natasha, without much ado, I would like to start with the first question just to hit you out with. And I'm so keen. Our audience are really thrilling to hear this particular topic. And it's all about what operational changes should startup or even an existing business expect as they scale.
Thank you, 𝗖𝗧. And it's a perfect question to get started because it really lays out more of a blueprint as we're talking of where you should be going to. And I think the first and the biggest point to make here is a shift from reactive to proactive operations. And we talked a little bit about it in our previous episodes as well. I am a huge advocate for being a proactive leader, for being a proactive company. But, in reality, what does it actually means being proactive? And it really means that you work on setting up processes that are there to fix any issues that come up, as opposed to fixing issues after they come up. That's the biggest difference. And coming back to the question, there's a lot of operational changes that are happening as you scale, and I'm not going to specify startup or not, but I'll give you some examples. So first of all, and I think that's the one that generally surprises people, it's transitioning from those roles that wear multiple hats into very specialized roles. And it does require a lot of preparations, and I think we're going to touch on that later in the episode, so I'm not going to go deep into it. But really, that's one of the first things that happens is just getting those specialized roles. I think one of the first specialized roles for a lot of startups specifically will be sales development representative. That's the person who now doesn't wear multiple hats. They have one specific job to do. For other companies that are more of on a later stage, I would say it's, hiring like HR or operational managers or generalist, I would say. And so that's the first point. I guess the second point is actually replacing your mental tracking with actual documented system. Instead of keeping everything in your head, you start, having everything documented so everybody can access the knowledge and not just, hey, go to Natasha because she knows how to do this. And yes, you actually have a proper documentation system. You have proper documentation software that people can use. right? And another important shift that happens, and I would say the most challenging one, it's when your operations and all your decisions are moving away from founder driven to team driven.
Okay.
When you, as a founder, give away to your team ability to make decisions, to execute, it's very hard for a lot of founders, but this is one of the biggest things that has to happen when you're scaling.
Absolutely with you. I'm 100% with you on this, Natasha. You just nailed it. It's something that the founders sometimes find it very difficult to let it go, to transfer that power to individuals to really manage or steer ahead this restructuring or that type of the second phase in documentation, making sure that all the processes and strategies is not in one individual head, but also having that kind of quality system in place to monitor all these processes and strategies, or even the workflow processes, right? So I'm absolutely with you on that. That's beautifully laid out. But that leads me to my next question. That is, how do operational inefficiency impact growth in business in general? Again, I don't want to really pin it or nail it to startups, but we still have operational inefficiency, even with existing companies that have been trailing all over the place for years and years, or for decades and decades, but they still have this operational inefficiency in there. So in this scenario, how do you navigate through in that growth?
Well, and that's good question, because it's important to understand what is the risk of not having good operations. And I think the biggest example, actually, or maybe a visual for you on having inefficient operations, is, example, you're driving a car, but you have your handbrakes on. And you're trying to, like, why? I'm trying to speed up. I can't.
Yeah.
And something is cracking, and something is, and if you push hard enough, eventually something's going to break, and it can cause very unpleasant situations. So what it actually translates to in the business world, I think when you have a lot of operational inefficiencies, what you experience is your scale is being crippled. Basically, those small inefficiencies that you have when you're small, they're not that visible. They're not that extreme. But as you start to scale, they become very bad for your company. And I think a good example here is, for example, a SaaS company having onboarding process where a bunch of team members have to be involved. They have to manually set up their new customer. They have to manually walk them through. And there's a bunch of different team members involved in this process. It's all fairly hands-on. In a sense, it gives them this nice white glove service. But when you start to scale and you still require that many team members doing that onboarding, your onboarding process for the new customers gets delayed further and further, to the point of, well, we signed up, but we're waiting now a month to get onboarded. And that's just a quick example of that small inefficiency that can really cripple you just getting new clients added to your system. The bigger one and the most common one is just the bottlenecks. Like when there's one person responsible for things, and there's a lot of things going for that one person to approve, and they just don't have enough time to look at everything. And then there's a bottleneck. And for bigger businesses, that can be multiple bottlenecks. And imagine what happens with multiple bottlenecks, right? I think, and the biggest turnaround on all of this is just your revenue generation start to slow down, to actually maybe going down, where you start losing people, start losing the customers. And the last but not least, I would say it's the team that really gets punished for everything, because they start to have to work longer hours. They're unsure sometimes of what's going on. They're facing angry customers, and just your team morale goes down. And that's where you start losing your top talent, because the A players, they want a healthy environment. And if there's no healthy environment that you as a company can build for them, they don't want to work for you anymore. So those are just some of the things that happen when your operations are not efficient.
Right. And this is the core aspect in business. I would say one of the core ingredients in driving a very successful business. operations. When we get all these fundamental in operations strong, firm, I think whether you're a startup, whether you're an existing business, or whether you've chucked success in your business of operations, I think operation it's really, really formidable, and it has to be well tacked and well fit in place to really get the mechanism going. This topic is really dear to my heart because I think, in my point of view, if operation fails, business fails. It's as simple as that, right? So, talking about that and how you've able to really, really digest it and break it down to our audience out there. Now, we can move on to the next level on how can startup or existing business prepare their operation for scaling? Because we might be, as I said, if our basics or fundamental is not firm, we shouldn't be expecting to scale up, right? Or in terms of moving into the next level, because we've not done our homework well. So in this instance, if you could help me to throw, or you could help to throw much more input up there, or some sort of, add more or less in an advice on how, how do startup prepare their operation for scaling? That would be great.
Of course, it's important to know that there are things that you can do. And I think the first one and the most important one is to make sure that your core operational processes are scalable first. What does that actually mean? I would say a good example is if you need a software as a part of your core operation, you make sure that you have enough seats there, you have enough storage there that can accommodate for your growth, right? I would say even make it, given a better example here, your hosting service for your product. It's scalable, like it has automatic storage scalability, it has automatic user scalability, so that when you're adding users, it doesn't slow down, it doesn't cause any delays, so it doesn't affect your product. That's the first thing that you can do. The second thing, and that's actually a rule that I really, really like, it's asking yourself what would break if you had 10 times more customers. So sitting down with your team and saying, you know what, here's the processes that we have. Let's imagine that we have now, instead of 10 customers, 100. Which processes will be hard for us to tackle? And that kind of discussion will have a lot of things coming out of it.
Right.
A lot. I'm not going to go into examples here because I do think this one is pretty obvious point. And the one that I mentioned before is documenting. Once you start growing, you'll have more team members joining. You will have basically the team become so much bigger that it's hard. It will be hard for people to run to another person, asking questions on how to do things. It's important to document. It's unpleasant. It's boring. I know. I'm the first person who doesn't like doing it, just from the perspective of it being a boring kind of job to do, but it's important because you need to share your knowledge. At some points, your brain starts forgetting things, or you're not available to answer an urgent question, and that's where the documentation really comes in, especially for your team when a new member is joining and they see a really nice documented processes.
Yeah.
That's where just culture kind of aspect begins, right? The next point that I have is choose a scalable cloud-based technology. And it can happen from day one, or it can happen throughout the time when you start seeing those, I would say, those tingling feelings of, hey, I'm about to start scaling up, right? And that's where you start choosing a technology that really scales with you. If we defer back to, for example, our previous episode, we were discussing financials, and I was saying we have QuickBooks here in North America that is perfect for small businesses, for startups. At a certain point, you outgrow that system, and it's really important to catch that time because, for example, transitioning from one system to another, it's a lot of work. And when you catch it on time and you transition to the system that actually can grow with you,
Right.
in my previous startup that I worked with, we transitioned from QuickBooks to NetSuite that could really accommodate for all of the things that company was doing, and it was great. So that's another thing to look for. The last but not least is just building the team, building a culture that identifies inefficiencies proactively. So just it's not just let's have a meeting about it. Put it in your team's heads that if there's inefficiency, we need to resolve it. And I would say here at EIM, we're really all about it. Just from the day one, the person joins our team, we say, you are owning the process. Now it's your process. And if you find anything that can be improved, that you think we can adjust, let's do it. So we're motivating for people to identify those inefficiencies and to actually improve it, give the suggestions on how to improve things, right? Because it's very important. You don't just require it from them, but you also motivate your team to look for those things.
Natasha, you've really touched on a very, 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 very broad topic that is now making the waves in terms of adapt technology, adapt improvement in terms of processes and stuff like that. Honestly speaking, we've got a bunch of colleagues up there who are scared to embrace improvement or process improvement or technology or anything up there, right? They are just going to say no to it. And something that I have always empowered my team in the past and still will do and continue to do is that, not just coming with an issue, but once you've identified an issue, coming with a solution to accompany it. So at the end of the day, you're not just thinking about finding problems or finding issues, finding roadblocks, finding bottlenecks, but also giving you the opportunity to think about, okay, this is what I have identified. What is the solution strategy? What is the solution here that I need to bring on the table? And it's very, very crucial that we install into leaders, into startup or whatever, that they should adapt that kind of possibility of open door to listen, to learn, and to adapt. And I always say to my team that I'm the head, but it doesn't mean that I know everything, right? So we have to join forces together, and of course to empower them to think outside the box, right? And of course bring new technology ideas, trends, and stuff like that that we could implement, adapt it to our business. And I love the way you've positioned it. So it's a very, very, very good topic, and I think we need to have a dedicated session where we talk about trends and adaptation in leadership. I think this is a topic that will be very, very interesting. It has just triggered me as well when you were explaining it, because it's a very, and we've AI at the moment is a topic when we've seen businesses trying to in that kind of, oh, okay, really, do I need it? Why do I need it? And even in certain religious background, trying to say no to it. Right, so it's a very, very broad topic, and this is not a topic we're going to talk today, but you've really hit it on a subject matter that we have to look into it. But without much ado, let's move on to the challenges that comes with scaling operations.
Of course, and they always come, and mostly they are actually internal as opposed to external, right? And as you actually just mentioned, the leadership plays a huge role here. When operations are scaling up, it's important to maintain very, very clear communication across the teams. And because the challenge is people do not know what's going on, and it's leadership's roles and responsibilities to let them know about it. So clear communication is the first and the most important thing, because when the changes are coming, there are generally multiple changes, and if people do not know that they're coming, they become scared, they become uncertain, they're slowing down, they're questioning what is happening. One approach that I personally like, and again the one that we have internally for EIM, is over communication. We are a remote team. We are working remotely. I think it's one of the most important things is over communicating, making sure that you're really getting your point across, you're explaining it multiple ways, because sometimes I say one thing and a person pictures another thing. If you ever played Pictionary, you know that's true.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
The other thing is investing into culture that can grow without founders' involvement everywhere. I would say putting the responsibility of growing the culture on your team rather than just driving it yourself. So, and that's a shift, because at the beginning, that's what you do. You as a leader, you as a founder is driving that culture. But
Right.
now, as you start to scale, that culture has to be put on a team to grow, and you're there as a team member. So everybody's responsible for it. Coming back to documenting knowledge, I know I mentioned it several times, but it is a painful point.
Right.
And I would say in this aspect, it is painful because when you ask people to document everything that they do, the first thought that people get is, am I being let go?
Control. Yeah.
Right? It's the first, and I think everybody experienced it, is their manager or their leader coming to them and being like, you know what, we need you to document everything that you do so many things, you're so important, we need to understand how to do things. So again, their communication comes in, and explaining why that documentation is needed is very important, because otherwise it's going to be, sitting on somebody's desk and being like, I don't want to do it, I just don't have a good feeling. If I don't do it, maybe they'll keep me for longer. That's the thoughts that go in through the team's head. You also have to consider that. So that's very, very important. Then the next thing is, you need to start balancing your standardization with flexibility.
Right.
Right. It's important to have standards. It's important to have standard procedures, but it has to be flexible enough to make sure it is accommodating your growth.
Right.
Right? For example, I would say the process of getting leads. You have a standard procedure in getting leads, but as your team grows, that process might not be applicable anymore. You need to design a process that is accommodating the growth. And the last thing that is very important is planning infrastructure that is looking ahead of the actual demand. So always being like one extra step before what demand is. I think the biggest example of this would be hiring before everybody's at 100% capacity. So this is just some of the examples of where to start looking into, addressing how to scale your operations.
Beautiful. At the back end of it, what and how does data play in scaling operations?
Data is very important these days. Everybody keeps talking about it. Everybody
Tell
says
me about
data.
me about it.
Right? Exactly. But what it is, nobody really talks about what data is. Or, well, okay, data is important. How do I get data? Where do I get it from? In my perspective, data is basically what describes your business. It's basically the numbers, the little sentences that says, hey, here's what your business looks like, and here's how you're performing. That's what data is. And in the aspect, it's a compass of where you're going. It shows you the direction where to go to. If you use the data correctly, you can put data in the map and use it as a compass, right? It's really that important. Yes. And first thing on data, it's the metrics that can actually show that you are scaling. That those are the first whispers that will tell you, hey, you're about to start scaling. That's why it's important to keep a close eye on it. And I would say, in early stages, those data points are fairly straightforward. It's your revenue, it's your customer count, and it's your burn rate. Once you see some fluctuations that show you, hey, where your customer count is going up, your burn rate is going up as well, and you're like, okay, yeah, I think I might be scaling, right? Then the next is, now that I'm starting to scale, maybe I need more data points to track. So coming from basic metrics into more sophisticated metrics. So now, how about we start tracking our customer acquisition cost? How about we start tracking lifetime value? How about we start tracking retention rates, right? So you come from those basics, you go into really more sophisticated metrics. And then as you keep going, right? You go into really descriptive and predictive data analysis. So what does it mean? You look at your historical, you find those patterns, and you start to predict. That's generally when on the financial side of things, you'll see the financials models have been created. That's where you'll see the pipeline growing, and the pipeline start being broken down by the channels. You start having like a cohort analysis. You start building like predictive churn models to understand, how your revenue will be growing. Then the next thing that you can do is make sure that you teach your team to make data-driven decisions. So you don't just, collect that data. You incorporate that in your daily decisions. Teach your team that it's not just numbers that we're making you collect. It's actually something actionable that we're doing with it. And it's very important because I've seen companies that collect data for the sake of collecting data and presenting it to the board. And that's it. And this is such a waste. I'm sorry, it is. Because you can do so much with it, right?
Tell me about it. Indeed.
And it's important, basically. Data is important. Use it. It can be a blessing.
Absolutely. And I'm a data junkie, and I'm telling you because I base all my facts, all my strategies on data to bring out the facts on the table. So I know exactly what you're talking about. Just a recoil back as to what we are talking today. It's still the topic: scaling operations from startup or existing business to growth phase. And this is very, 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 very crucial. And it's so important, and I'm enjoying the scale so far. And just a short ad here. If you are looking to take your business to the next level, at 𝗖𝗧 Consulting or EIM in Canada, we are specialized in providing tailored solutions that help you overcome challenges, streamline your operations, and achieve sustainable growth. Whether you are refining your strategy, scaling up, as we're talking about in some of our questions that Natasha mentioned or answered our questions for us, or navigating complex business landscapes. Our teams from both 𝗖𝗧 Consulting and EIM is here to guide you every step of the way. Let's turn your vision into reality, right? And connect with us today at 𝗖𝗧 Consulting in Germany or EIM in Canada. So, Natasha, we're going to move on to the next question that I've got under my sleeves here. And this is very, very also probably most audience or most of our audience that will be listening to this recorded version will be, their fingers will be itching to throw this question to you if it happens to be a live recording. But I'm going to ask this question on their behalf. And that is, balancing operational efficiency with the need for growth. Can you help us to elaborate or to really put it up beautifully there? How are we going to balance that kind of operational efficiency here?
Of course, yes. And one comes with another, obviously. I still want to come back to that car example that I did earlier, where in this instance, we have growth. That's when we're watching our speedometer, right? When we're driving the car. And operational efficiency, that's our engine temperature. So you have to be really careful to watch those two. If you push too hard on the gas, your engine temperature becomes quite dangerous, right? We don't want it to explode.
Yeah.
So that's why, you take turns, right? You speed it up, you let your engine come to that level, it cools down, then you speed up again. And that's, I think, the approach that we should keep in the business as well. Create like that stage-based approach where, you scale up to a certain level, your operations scale up. Again, operations, revenue operation. Keep that turn. Always watch for those growth. Make sure that it's not happening at the same time, because the team can kind of become overwhelmed. One biggest advice that I can give to everybody is avoid growth at all costs, because it will sacrifice your quality, and this will result in you losing people. That's where the growth was for nothing, pretty much. The sacrifice was for nothing, right? So that that's one thing. Never grow and be like, we'll just push, we'll just get new clients, and then the quality becomes worse, and then you start losing your customers. And one thing that, keep a close eye on is there's always those timely opportunities for automation. It's like that perfect timing that will appear where you can add in automation on a process that have been happening. And if you time it correctly, you will avoid waste and bottlenecks, right? Because that specific timing will always show up where you need to automate a process that's been happening, and then it will help you grow. Right? I would say divide your operations into core and context. So find those core operations that are very, very important, invest in them. Make sure that they're golden, they're scalable, they're working, they require as little maintenance as possible. And then in those context operations, you can then either outsource them, or now that we have AI agents, you can use those as well. A perfect example that just recently came into market is fully AI agent that fully automates SDR roles, right? It is fairly repetitive things that generally being done there. And I would say it's at certain stages, it's worth investing in those models. They're not that cheap. So generally you do need a certain amount of growth and revenue before you invest in it, but they're out there, right? So it's just looking for those things where you can balance automation, you can balance how fast you're moving with the quality that you're providing.
The way you've listening to the way you've answered the this particular question, I was able to pick three main points out, and I have to highlight it again to our audience. And Natasha mentioned growth at all costs. It's a trap. We need to be very, very careful. Although we want to grow, but we shouldn't take, all these circumstances and the attached, what they call it, missteps into it. We need to take that into consideration. Growth at all costs, please. Let's be very, very careful about that, because it might sound to be a trap. Instead of growing steadily. The second point I pick up is also intentional growth phases. When Natasha mentioned the smart startup alternates between sprints and operational consolidation periods, and of course, core versus context. So this is a very, very good point here. And that leads me to my next question. What are the risks then, right, of not scaling operations effectively? I know there are a couple of risks that comes with that. But at this point, I would just, throw the ball into your court to give you, from your perspective, what are the risks of not scaling operation effectively?
And I think they're quite the opposites of what we mentioned in terms of growth and opportunities, right? The first thing is obvious. It's just not meeting customer demand, and then your churn increase. Because first you predicted a certain growth, you predicted a certain churn, and then all of a sudden your operations are not giving that quality again. All of this falls apart. That's the first and foremost. The second is, I would say, costs can grow faster than your revenue. And that's quite an unpleasant situation to be in, because your runway becomes much shorter when your costs increase. You do have to watch for that. Team burnout, because they're just constantly fighting the fires, right? We talked about it. It's important. Your team is what makes you a company. You have to take care of them. If they're constantly feeling like they're firefighters, all that pressure, they stress out, you're just not doing good to your company.
Yeah.
That's it.
Right. Yeah.
And coming back to the first, to the quality, sometimes when even for the short period, if you screw up on that quality, it can have that long-lasting effect that can damage just your public reputation. Imagine there's so many platforms right now, like there's LinkedIn, or Google, the most obvious, right? Somebody leaves a negative review, it will push down just your overall review. Like just that 1-star review from one person can really damage your reputation, right? So it's important that this doesn't happen. And the biggest point about being in the firefighting mode, I would say it prevents companies from bringing innovation and to have an evolution in the company, right? If people are always stressed out, they cannot give you like, hey, here's the process that we can improve. And it's hard, right? Because you're constantly stressed out. And for the companies, especially in our day and age where we have so much new innovations happening, is crucially important to stay on top of those innovations, make sure they implement it within their companies, because otherwise they lose their competitive advantage. And we've seen so many companies that gone through that phase, and we don't hear about those companies anymore.
Right. Yeah. So you've listened a lot. You've really helped us to really understand this particular topic, but also those who would like to really reach out to us to assist them. It might be a startup, it might be existing business in scaling their operations. I would say at City Consulting, we offer strategy guidance on scaling operations, helping startups align their processes as well, because we're talking about the processes, but not just that. You align your processes with growth, with long sustainable growth. And this is one of our key expertise in trying to minimize or help the startup and existing business to minimize their risk. If the risk is already there, how we could navigate through that risk together. And I strongly believe EIM also have a very fantastic approach to startups or to existing business. So, Natasha, if you could echo that to our audience, that would be great. Let me give you the platform at this point in time.
Thank you, Clancy. Of course, I'll be short here. I think the biggest advantage of working with the EIM is that we take this strategic alliance approach. We don't even call our customers, we call them partners, because that's the approach that we would like to take.
Exactly.
We're holding hands together.
Right.
We're growing together. We design processes that is 12, 24, or 36 months looking into the growth. That we provide not just strategy, we do the hands-on work. I like to say a lot of times we do get things done. Those things that have been heading or piling up on your desk or desktop, right? We're getting those over the lines. The big thing that we do also is we learn about the companies that we work with. We are excited. We like the companies that we work with, and we design solutions that are specific to them, not just industry specific, not just, stage specific, but specific to their businesses. If you look at the chart of the accounts, for example, that we built for some companies, you'll be like, oh, wow, they really put into it. Like, you can see all the revenue streams that those companies have, and you can see the costs, right? And that's how important. Like, we even do like employee handbooks for some of our partners, and those employee handbooks, they have their core values, they have everything, right? We really need to understand the companies that we work with. And the biggest, I would say, value that we also bring is we identify potential bottlenecks before they emerge. We really look into the structure of the company. We look who does what and be like, you know what, I think you need to delegate. Yes, I did have that conversations with some of our co-founders of the startups that we work with. And, it's always funny how we position ourselves in those meetings.
Yeah.
I sometimes hear founders say, Natasha puts me on the spot, but Natasha really makes me sometimes think, of some things. And that's the beauty. That's the beauty of what we do. We see the impact of what we do, and our whole team is motivated by that.
Lovely.
So, yeah, that's a little bit about us.
Lovely. So look, you've really mentioned a lot what EIM is offering out there or has got in its portfolio up there. And guys, look, together with City Consulting, we are a force to reckon with. If you need any support, do not hesitate at all to reach out to us, City Consulting, and of course EIM. in Canada. Natasha, now we're going to move on or get into the final lap of our
Mhm.
third episode. But there's also one question that I will not, I will not close this episode without asking that. And it's about what operational system should startup invest in as they scale? Because this is a question that is definitely on the lips of a lot of startups and even existing companies who are even lingering and wondering and having headaches as to what and how operational system should we be taking it into our business process or our business strategy as we grow, as we scale up, or as we move on to the next level. If you could also help us here or to help our audience to understand, that would be great.
Of course. And that's where I like this kind of questions, because now we're making sure that people who are listening to us can walk away with a specific set of advices that they can actually go and implement, right? And in this question, I can give a lot, but I'll keep it fairly brief, right? Because we've been talking for a while. I think the rule of the thumb is once your Excel spreadsheet for a certain process that you have grows over, I would say, 200 lines, that's where you need to automate that process. And the first one to go, the first and the foremost, is a CRM. Implementing a CRM on time, and make sure you do implement it on time, because transferring from Excel spreadsheet into CRM can sometimes be a bit of a work. But yes, generally the CRM is the first and foremost system that gets implemented. One good point to mention, actually, before implementing any system whatsoever, is making sure that whatever tools you choose, they integrate well into your ecosystem, because there are multiple products for CRM, but the beauty of, again, being in the 21st century is there are CRMs that can address certain industries. So making sure that you choose the right CRM. And I'll give you a couple examples. Again, North American. I'm not that familiar with European CRM providers, but for example, HubSpot, ideal for SaaS companies. Then we also have Jobber, that is ideal for those businesses that work off quotes. So for example, catering business or construction business. So yes, there are a couple, those are like some of the systems that we actually worked with, and because we're working with multiple partners from multiple industries. So making sure that the tool that you're choosing can integrate very well with what you're doing.
Okay.
If you're, for example, a business that has inventory, making sure that you implement that inventory product. Some of the products, some of the tools have multiple, not tiered, but they have multiple products and that you can add on as you grow. I do recommend choosing those kind of systems, because if you have ability to keep everything in one place where your team can log in and just have access to everything that you need, that's perfect, right? That's pretty much your scalable system.
Right.
You're putting like a check mark there. That's the scalable system that I need. Again, HubSpot is a great example of that, because you can just keep adding on and adding on. Even so, it can get expensive. So be careful when you add on those things, right? I think very important to single out here is a financial system as well, because you need to make sure that your financials are always on time. Making sure that you have the right financial system for your stage is crucial. Because when you outgrow a financial system, you get delayed reports. And that's where your decision making starts getting delayed. And when your financials, decisions get delayed, a lot of things kind of go on a pause. So let's not go in there, right? And the last but not least is project management. Once you have more than 10, 15 people, make sure that you do have a project management system. There's so many tools. There's Jira, there's Asana, there's, oh my God, what's the Trello? There's a lot of tools.
Yeah.
That's my point. All right. And make sure there's a bit of a project management, because why I like project management system, because you still have a visibility with them on what everybody's doing, but you're stepping away from micromanagement. You're not doing that. You're just having, hey team, here's our management, project management system. Please keep it up to date. And then you have the visibility. So yes, these are some of the systems that you can implement to really help you succeed, help you grow, help you scale.
Cool. So this is so beautiful layout down there. And we're going to move on to probably the last question for the day. And for our audience, remember, this is not the end of our episodes yet. We're coming with much more in the pipeline. Get ready for much more discussion with Natasha to drill her, to give you all the the input that she's got under her sleeves as well, to encourage you to grow, to help you to grow, to make sure that you are growing at the perfect scale. We're talking about operationals, and people might be thinking, our audience might be thinking, oh, that's so rigid, process that we have to follow and that kind of thing. But I just want to ask, because I know, but I just want to chip this question on behalf of our audience. Is there any importance or any agency of looking into operational flexibility here when scaling a business?
Oh yes, 100%. It's very important. I think overall, everybody has to be flexible to changes in personal and business aspects. It's very important. And I think from a business perspective, everybody whoever did something on their own knows that whatever you plan rarely goes exactly how you planned it. Right? Even if you plan a family outing, it rarely goes 100% the way that you planned it. And that's like the simplest example there, right? And the same with business, because you're working with people. It's always changing. People have moods. There's delays and whatever. But the point is, rarely anything goes exactly as it was written down. So that's why it's important to, make sure that you have flexibility and adaptability. Those two things working together. When you're building a system, make sure that you put a structure into it, but that structure is flexible. Right? So you have, a bit of a wiggle room, right? Or you can add to it. And then the next is making sure that your team is actually adaptable and flexible as well. And it starts when you're hiring. Make sure that you hire people who are adaptable, who are flexible, who are not people, I've been doing this for 10 years, I know what I'm doing, and you're wrong. We don't need to change anything. No, we don't want those kind of people. We want people that are very adaptable, that they can flexible, and they can add, they add a tremendous value to your business. Another good advice is to create a modular operations, so that it means you can take out a piece of that operation, work on it, update it, put it back. But it doesn't impact too much on how the rest of your business is doing. So, for example, if you need to update your sales team, or I guess scale your sales team, you start with small pieces, but the process keep going, right? You have small modules that you're updating. And again, coming back to core processes, make sure that those core processes have flexibility as well, because it's very, very important when you're scaling. They should be flexible. Everything should be flexible, basically.
I'm with you. I'm absolutely with you. And talking about flexibility, so look, audience, this is definitely not just about rigid process in place, a tactful process in place, and then running to the to the finish line. Flexibility is been mentioned here. Adaptability has been mentioned here. To grow as well is also very, very important. To bring everybody on the table to have a voice to say, or to have a voice on how the business should run. It's so, so crucial. And this is what makes business very strong. This is what makes even a community, this is what even makes a family very, very strong. Having a voice on the table. And I love it how we've tackled it from business perspective, and to help our startups and to help our existing business. How crucial it is when you are employing people or onboarding new employees on the table or into your business. Please make sure you reserve a space or a place for them on the table to bring their ideas. Not only that alone, but also give them the room to grow. Not only that alone, but also make sure that we have all our tools and mechanism in place that is going to agitate and help the business to get on his right foot and to run in the expected direction. This is so beautifully laid down here. And just to give you an appetite of what is coming next in our fourth episode, it's going to be unlocking innovation through financial data. And I can't wait to listen to Natasha one more time on this particular topic, because I know our audience up there are also eager to listen to this beautiful topic, but quite complex. But I've got someone who is going to help you to break that topic down for you, and that is Natasha. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Beyond the Blueprint. I hope you found today's conversation, as I have, as insightful and inspiring as I did, right? So, whether you're growing, again, an existing business, or launching a startup, or simply looking for fresh perspective, our goal is to provide you with a practical insight, as we've done throughout our previous episodes, and of course, a meaningful stories to help you move forward. A huge thank you to my special guest, Natasha from EIM in Canada, for sharing her expertise and perspective, of course, with us, right? If you are interested in learning more about the topics we've covered or want to connect with us, be sure to check out our show notes for additional resources and contact information. Remember, success isn't just about the plan beautifully laid down there. No, it is about the journey beyond the blueprint. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep building. I am Clancy Tete, and I can't wait to meet you here again. Natasha, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.